Good morning, everybody. So we're going to look at correspondence, which is the first unit in the book. So those of you that have your book, open it to page 1. Correspondence. Unit 1, page 1, correspondence, which is a fancy name for letters. That's all we're going to look at, letters, as boring as that sounds. If you don't have the book, don't worry too much. All you really need to do is just follow along. I'm going to talk through this. Most of lesson 1 is going to be me talking. In fact, most of English is going to be me talking. I talk a lot, as you probably have worked out for yourselves. So by the end of this unit, you should be able to, they always say this, listen for emotional appeal. So in other words, you should have functional ears and a human soul. If you do, you're going to be fine. Read and understand various kinds of correspondence. So various kinds of letters. Now, we've said before, this book is massively out of date. These things were written about 15 years ago, where emails were a novel, a new idea. People don't write letters to the same degree that they used to, that's absolutely certain. But they do still exist, especially in the professional sphere, legal sphere. Legally, you still have to sign contracts so that there's a record of your signature. Those still happen. So it is something that still occurs once in a while. So it's important to know the rules of them, why they work and how they work. So we will look at various different kinds of letters, and we'll look at how to make a good one versus how to make a bad one. But as usual, the simple rule of thumb is the more effort you put in, the more you'll get out. That's basically true of life. You'll use grammatical features associated with various kinds of correspondence. Again, this book tries to make a huge deal out of a very minor point. You're going to be able to use grammatical features such as verb phrases. But that's something you use every day anyway, so it's kind of a bit of a misnomer. Sorry, just had to make sure I actually plugged the microphone in because it's early and I've only had 1 cup of coffee. Use appropriate tone and formal and informal language. Formal and informal language is something that I'm going to beat into you over the next few weeks, I guess. The difference between formal and informal language. Now, I don't know what your previous teachers were like and what they taught you, what they didn't teach you. Formal language is business English. Informal language is the language you use with friends. So formal is where it has to be strictly correct. Informal is where the rules are more relaxed. The reason we use formal or business or proper correct English is because language is a very dynamic thing. The rules of grammar change depending on where we teach them. Now, in this school, you're quite lucky that we actually use a Singaporean system. So the Singaporean English uses exactly the same English grammar. You use English correctly. But when you're online, you're mostly going to see American English. I mean, there's no such thing as American English. There is English and there is wrong. And that's what the Americans use. They use a modified version. You've all seen the obvious example. I don't have a pen. No one's given me a pen. No one's given me anything yet. You've all seen how they spell colour, C-O-L-O-R, instead of C-O-L-O-U-R. Don't want to see that in my class. The reason they did that is when they were setting America up, they were sending correspondence by telegram. And what that means is that you would go into an office, you would send a message, and then that message would be sent by Morse code. ... .. So somebody a sender would send the telegram along an electrical cable and they would charge by the letter. Every letter would cost you money. So they simplified things down for correspondence so they could send the least amount of letters possible in a message. That's why they dropped the U from colour and a lot of other letters from their language. Why they changed S to Z, I can only assume is because they were idiots. So don't want to see those kind of abbreviations. Now, the reason we use formal language is because in each country they have slightly different rules. For instance, if I was talking about myself and a friend, it would be my friend and I. Now, that would be correct grammar. But in English, normally, informally, we would say me and my friend. In Australia, the rules are exactly the opposite. Me and my friend is grammatically correct. My friend and I is what people actually say. So the rules change depending on where you are. Now, the rules are even more different if we go somewhere like Singapore, where English isn't spoken well. It's not taught well. The Philippines, all around Europe where they do teach English but not properly, not to the same standard at least. So those people don't speak English very well, and you can't use informal English for them because they're not going to understand it. So formal English is an attempt to get everything right so that anybody in the world can understand it. And that's never been more important than it is today, where we're basically internet connected to everybody else in the world. So formal English is very important, and it's what you should use for any professional correspondence. If you're going to send a CV, if you're going to write your CV, you're going to write a report, you're going to do anything at work, it's formal English. And it's shocking when I work in an English language school like this one, how much of the correspondence between myself and the people running it are in informal English or in completely incorrect English. It's horrifying. Use appropriate tone, done that one. Participate in a teleconference. There's no such thing as teleconferences anymore. This is a teleconference. It used to be that there were no cameras, no technology when this was written. So you'd literally have a phone call where everybody else could join into the phone call, and the phone call could be shared by 20, 30 people. That was a teleconference. Those things are dead now. We have live streams, we have video conferencing, we have Zoom meets, we have all sorts of things. So that's pretty much dead. And there wouldn't be much point me trying to teach you how to do it because you've been doing it in this for 2 years. So that's kind of irrelevant. Elaborate on different topics. Oh, this book. It just makes you want to shred this through a paper shredder and then feed it back to the person who wrote it. Write various types of formal letters. We'll look at how to write them. We might get towards writing a letter. Traditionally, I've always enjoyed doing something like this as your final test. So we do the monthly test as the final product of the chapter. So the unit 1 is finally building you up to write a letter. That would normally have been your assignment. Last year, for instance, we weren't locked down at the beginning of the year. The final monthly test was to write a letter of complaint. So you'd write a complaint letter to me complaining about how bad I am as a teacher. So it's a bit of fun. You get to vent on the things that are annoying you, and I'm also able to check it and make sure that you're using formal English correctly. So it was a good all-round exercise, but I think they've changed the rules, so we have to give you a paper test that's illogical. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so moving on to page 2. We skip the groups thing. So overview. Correspondence refers to written communication. I guess that's true, but things are changing. Teleconferencing, Zoom meetings and that sort of thing now, it's changing technology. Letters are becoming less and less frequent. Emails are becoming more and more common. And if you've ever been in a chat room, you'll see that most people can't even formulate a sentence. And I'm a writer. I go in a lot of writers' chat rooms, and the amount of writers who cannot write, even write a comment in a chat room, is appalling. Usually in the form of letters. These letters can be formal or informal. I would go as far as arguing that these days there are no such things as informal letters. We now have chat options, we have video options, we have soundbite options. I don't think anybody writes an informal letter anymore. I think that's a shame. I think it's something we've lost, and I think it's a negative to society, but it is what it is. No one's going to sit down and write a letter. We used to. I remember writing letters after Christmas. You'd get your Christmas presents, you'd write a letter of thanks to everybody as a child, and it's great practice. It's a great way to learn the language. And it's also a good way of learning culture, how you fit into things. It's a good system, and I feel like we've lost something because of it. I mean, you only have to look out the window at how screwed up society is right now. And you think this is bad? I've got friends in America, and it's crazy over there. So things are falling apart rapidly. So I'd go as far as saying there's no informal letters anymore. These days people are communicating via the internet. Most people are going to shoot off a PM or something along those lines. Long emails. I don't even use emails anymore, and I'm a writer. I am a writer. I have a website. I deal with a lot of people. I almost never use my email box anymore. I only use email boxes now for attachments. If I'm sending a whole book to my co-author, I'll send an email, but the email usually has "see attached" written on it, and that's all it's for. I don't send long emails. We normally send through Facebook or other chats. I use Twitter quite a bit now because all the Americans I talk to use Twitter. So I communicate almost entirely now in chat rooms. Informal letters are usually received from and sent to family and friends. Informal communications. We need to think in terms of communication instead of letters, because it's not relevant to you. These include postcards, greeting cards, and letters. Again, I don't think you've ever seen a postcard, and I don't think you ever will. Postcards were dead and gone long before I left England. They were small pieces of card, now that I think of it, about a quarter the size of an A4 page. They usually have a glossy photograph on one side, and you just write a very short message. So on the back, you can imagine how small they are. It would be half and half for the message, and the other half would be for the address. And you'd post it to a friend or family back home. They had died out as a form of communication long before I was born. We used to use them when we went on holiday, send a picture, a postcard back home. I think it's pretty much dead now. These days it's all Instagram, and other things like that. So I'm also watching my other class. They inform the recipients about recent events in a familiar, personal manner. They're written in informal tone. The purpose of this kind of letter is to pass on information, seek information, and to keep in touch. Again, all irrelevant to you because you're so connected. Your phone, my phone, and I'm old, my phone probably has 20 ways on here for me to stay in touch with my friends and family, and I use different methods for all of them. The wife likes sending messages on Facebook. Facebook's most frequent to me. Facebook Messenger is the one I use most often. I use Twitter, I use Instagram, I use Skype, I can't remember the others. I use Instagram, Telegram. Yeah, there's quite a few. There's probably 20 ways on there that I can communicate with my friends, and I don't communicate with them at all. That's the funny thing. We've never been more connected or disconnected. If you've ever gone out, go to a restaurant, look around, everybody puts their phones down, says hello, sits down, orders some food, laughs and jokes, and then slowly it gets quieter and quieter as everybody picks up their phones and plays with their phones. And what are they doing with their phones? Talking to their friends. They're there with their friends, and they're talking to their other friends on their phones, or showing, look, I'm eating this, I'm showing you a picture of the food I'm eating. Why not just eat the bloody food? It's crazy. Your generation, wow. I know. Thank you, boomer. We didn't have that in England. Much official business is still carried out through letters. Much less these days, much less. But it does happen, especially in the legal trade. Anyone that wants to be a lawyer or any professional business person at some point is going to sign contracts, and they usually are done with proper letters. Formal letters are not only sent by business organizations. From time to time, you or members of your family will need to write formal letters when dealing with organizations when a formal written response is required. Now that does still happen, but mostly it's done online these days via email or via Dropbox. We're talking about something like a complaint where you've got a serious issue and there's got to be a recorded communication. Okay, so what you'll do is you'll send in your complaint and you'll use an email. You won't send a PM, you'll send an email because you want a copy, because you want proof that you've done it. That's what these letters used to be. They used to be a copied proof. So you take a photocopy and then you send the letter, and then there would be a correspondence. Then there would be a record of your communication between these two people, and if you had to elevate it and become a legal matter, you had the evidence. These days, emails do that far better because there's always a copy, there's always a date and timestamp, there's always proof that it's been read at the other end. Email does this much better. So we've moved over towards emails for this. But there are times when you're going to have to send a professional email. A letter of complaint is an example. Correspondence in terms of a CV. If you apply for a job, and somebody might reply to you. Again, you want evidence of that. You want a record of the communication between you. If you're buying a car, registering tax, registering your license, all of those things require some kind of reply in terms of an email. And for those things, we use an email because we've got a record of it. We don't just send something through Facebook, and we certainly don't trust the apps. I was talking to somebody on Stripe, a payment service, and I got some emails back from them in their own chat box. Never trust a website's own chat box, because they can delete all the information, and they will delete all the information quickly. Always try and communicate them through an email so you've got a copy, okay? The language used in formal letters is clear, direct, assertive, unemotional, and courteous. Formal letters include sufficient information to convey the message. So the language used in formal letters is clear, direct, and assertive. So in other words, you keep it simple. You don't add emotion. Emotion just clouds everything. Look at the whole liberal agenda right now. We've got this thing in America where the liberals are offended by everything. That is a horrible way to think. That's how children behave. I mean, I've got one. I know how children behave. They get emotional and they don't really know why, and they have a little tantrum, and then it's all forgotten and moved on from. And that's what liberals are. They're emotionally stunted to the point where they're thinking with emotions instead of intellectually. We need to think intellectually, not emotionally. We take all the emotion out of official correspondence. You won't get, well, that's not true. I was going to say politicians, you don't get them acting emotionally, but of course these days quite the opposite, we do. But you won't get, okay, as an example, I spoke to my wife last night. She's in charge of an accounts department, and she's having trouble with the sales team. They come to her with problems, and she said, some of them don't like me, and I wonder, am I the problem? So we talked it through. I said, no, they're the problem. And I said to her, look, let me guess, right? The ones you're not having problems with are the high achieving salesmen, right? She said, that's right. How did you know? I said, well, they're high achieving because they understand how to do their job properly, right? So they're not causing you any problems, and when they do cause problems, they come to you and say, excuse me, I've made a mistake, can you help me fix it? She goes, yes, that's exactly right. I said, and the ones that don't like you, they're not getting a lot of money, they're not making any money, and they're causing a lot of problems, and then they're blaming you. She goes, yes, there you go. Because they're getting emotional. They're not mature enough not to be emotional. You can always tell the failures don't make any money, and they always act emotionally. The successes always think logically, okay? That's the division in life. That's why formal letters, we do it unemotionally, because we are contacting professionals who do things properly, okay? That's the logic and the thinking behind it. When people get emotional, they're useless. I had the same problem at work. I was working with a girl who lost it in a meeting. She just went mental. She came and apologized later, but it was extremely unprofessional display, and it embarrassed everybody. And she did it in front of students as well. She didn't last very long, and she was one of those crazy people, shaved her head down one side. Oh God, she was ridiculous. She caused so many problems. So yeah, formal letters include sufficient information to convey the message and nothing more. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Formal letters should include sufficient information to convey the message, but no more. So what that means is we don't add anything that's superfluous or unnecessary. We don't say, I'm emailing you to complain about my phone. It's absolute garbage, and I'm very disappointed. By the way, my brother is doing fine. How's yours? We don't do any of that. We keep to the point. We don't add any random information. We don't tell them anything personal. That's actually really good advice about anybody dealing with any kind of business. Don't give people information that they haven't asked for. Keep it strictly need to know. And people in business are not your friends, and you don't need to know. They don't need to know. Again, something I was telling the wife. She's not really cut out to be a manager, and she's worried that people don't like her. And I said, look, it's not relevant. These people aren't your friends. The ones who are your friends anyway. They're not going to care about how you have to behave at work. They're going to understand. The ones who care about the way you behave, they're not really your friends. They're only using you, so they're not your friends. So in business, don't tell anybody anything that they don't need to know. So formal letters should be set out according to a standard format. That does vary country to country and depending on the situation you're writing it. In this way, recipients know where to find certain information in the letter so they can scan the letter and understand the message quickly. So what we're talking about is the same thing with other kinds of presentations that we've made. I don't know what other teachers have gone through with you, but when we lay out a report or a document, we use subheadings, we break it down into a nice logical order so that anyone can go through, get the information that they want quickly without reading the whole thing. It's just the same thing. So we break the letter down into an introduction, a close, and the body, just like with any other kind of non-creative writing. A recipient makes judgments about the writer of the letter based on the extent to which he or she follows accepted letter writing conventions. That's absolutely true. We all make judgments about the things that we see in front of us, and that's absolutely human nature, and it's absolutely correct to do so. People say, don't judge a book by its cover, but that's why books have covers, okay? Working as a writer myself, we are very into the whole cover thing. We have an artist who works on our covers for us, because that's the first point of contact. If I write a book, people are going to look through books and there are hundreds of choices. I need to make mine stand out so that you notice it quickly. We do that with a good quality cover that gives you a good idea of what the book's about. If the cover works, the person will pick up the book, turn it over and read the blurb on the back. If the blurb works, they might open the cover and read the first paragraph. If the first paragraph works, they'll read the first page. If the first page works, they'll read the first chapter. That's when they start thinking about buying the book, etc. So having a good cover, writing it the right way is very, very important. Otherwise, you're going to be judged negatively. And we see this a lot. I see people say, don't judge me on my appearance. You should judge people on their appearance, but you should also learn how to judge people on their appearance. It's not fair to judge somebody on the color of their skin because they can't choose that. It's not fair to judge somebody because they don't have any hair. That's something else they don't have control of. But we can judge things on the choices that they've made. I've got no hair. Now I could choose to grow long bits at the front and comb it over and look like a complete imbecile. But I don't choose to do that. I just shave it off and be done with it. So you can tell that I like things to be practical. I like less hassle. I don't pretend I'm something I'm not. I don't try and pretend I'm younger than I really am. I just shave my head and be done with it. You can tell a lot about me from that choice, and you could tell a lot about somebody who doesn't do that. You could tell a lot about someone that walks around in a suit versus someone that walks around in ghetto-style clothes, slouches over and wears their hat backwards, tattoos all down their arm. These tell us a lot about the choices someone makes and the sort of person they want you to think they are. And you always get the same thing. The people who give away a bad impression are always the first to complain about being judged for it. It's right to judge somebody on the choices they've made and the perspective they give across. But you will be judged. If your letter isn't up to a certain standard, you will be judged. Now think about that. If you write your CV and you have a cover letter, and the cover letter is supposed to do the job of a book cover by getting that person to read your CV. That cover letter, if it looks bad, you're done. It's going in the bin. Now I've done recruitment. Trust me, I would have done this in grade 10 with you. I would have gone really into the depths of recruitment. It's a very, very busy field. There's a lot going on. As an example, we had a job we were advertising. It was a part-time job, 16 hours, and we had something like 10,000 applicants. So the first thing we've got to do is throw away as many as possible. And the first trick is to take half the CVs and throw them in a dustbin, because we don't want unlucky people working for us. Then we start going through them. That was a joke, by the way. Then we start going through them, and any that look bad, any that don't have good English, we throw them straight in the bin. Now, good English is even more important in England, where it's the first language tool, and everyone should be able to use it properly. If you can't, it tells me a lot about you. Either you're an idiot, or you're lazy, or you just don't care. Either way, I don't want you in my company. I want someone that I can trust. So we get rid of a lot of those letters straight away, quickly. You don't want to be one of those people. So be careful to make sure that your letters make sense. I still get today emails from some of my students that I used to teach years ago, like sometimes 8 or 9 years ago, emailing me now and saying, can you help me with a reference? Can you help me with getting my CV straight so I can apply for this job or that job? And I'm always happy to do it, and that's what you should do. Always double check, make sure that your letter is the finest standard, because it speaks for you. If you can't be bothered to get your CV right, I know you won't get anything else right. Your CV is your #1 point of contact, so get that right. The recipient makes judgments. Those who do not follow accepted conventions are usually thought to be lazy, rude, ignorant, uneducated, or lack communication skills, or all of those things. Now, there are accepted conventions, and there are a good reason to break those conventions. There was a comedian in England called Des something or other, I can't remember his name, big fat guy he was, and he was a pianist, so he'd play the piano really, really badly, so badly that people would laugh. And then they did an interview once and he said, oh, you're a really bad pianist. He said, actually, I'm a really good pianist. He said, I understand how to break the rules. I know how to play just enough to surprise the audience by then suddenly becoming bad and then looking bad. He said, making it look funny, first of all, you have to be good at it. And there was another guy who was a comedian. He was a magician, and it'd always ruin his tricks. But again, he was a professional magician first and knew how to do it right. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to break the rules, first of all, you have to know what they are. You can't go and write any old crap and think that it's okay to break those rules. Firstly, you've got to master the rules, then know how to bend them. We did The Edge, me and Seth and I, sorry, I'm an English teacher, Seth and I, we wrote a book and we broke all the rules, but we did it because we'd already established what the rules were, and then we bent them in new ways that amused us, made it fun to write the book. Things like in a story, you're supposed to stick to one character's perspective through the story. So in one chapter, we did a blended version of that where we'd stick to the perspective of one character, the character would walk over, talk to another character, and we'd slowly shift perspective and then move on to the perspective of the other character as they walked off. So the perspective was shifting like a baton through the story. No one had ever done that before, so we wanted to try it, and when we read it back, nobody noticed that we'd done it. And that's the trick. If you break the rules properly, no one will notice that you've done it. And that takes skill. So learn the rules of English grammar first before you even think about breaking them, because otherwise it's going to look obvious and you will just look lazy, rude, ignorant, uneducated, or lack communication skills. Maybe someone won't sit there and think those things, but what they will think is, I can't be bothered to read this. I don't care about this person. Okay? So think about that. Think about the way you come across. These opinions have a negative effect on the recipient's response to the letter. Yeah, I mean, if you're complaining and you're a customer, nobody expects you to have the best mastery of grammar. You're just a customer, which means you already have privilege. But if you're applying for a job, or if you're applying for a contract and your letter's bad, people aren't going to care. If I get 2 letters for a job, one of them's really good, one of them's really bad, the first one I'm going to look at is the good one. You want that privilege. You want to be #1. Master the language. So the following are formal letters written for various purposes. Again, time has made sure that these things change. A letter sent to ask for information. So you might write for more information about something, and that's normally in terms of a customer asking for information about some product, but it can also be, please let me know more about this job, something like that. So depending on what it's for, obviously as a customer you have a lot more freedom of expression. As somebody looking for something, asking for something, you have less. A letter sent to offer thanks, congratulations, or condolences, those are very different things. To say, hey, thanks for this, or congratulations on your new job, are very, very different to, I'm sorry your cat died. Those things are very, very different. So those letters need to be written in completely different ways. Normally they will be fairly informal, but think of the letter you might write to your boss if his mother died. That can't be informal. That's got to be sympathetic, strictly formal, and also let him know that you really do care. So getting the right balance there is quite hard, very much harder than congratulating. Again, you want to congratulate your boss if they've got a promotion, but you want to do it the right way. A letter sent to ask for advice or express a view. We do this in England. We write strongly worded letters. I mean, we do it all the time. Critics do it about movies. I do it on my website. There are critical arguments against things, for things. We express our view. Asking for advice, again, would normally be normally be informal, but in a formal setting it still happens, especially if you were to ask your boss, look, I'm considering this or that, which do you recommend? So those things need to be more formal. And again, these days would be an email. An email has a record. If you were asking a lawyer for advice, you would want a record of that advice, because then if it was bad advice, you'd want to be able to say to the police or the government, I asked for advice, this is what I was told to do, I was following legal advice. This isn't my fault, please don't send me to prison for the rest of my life. And a letter of reference. Yeah, we get those a lot for jobs, university placements, foreign exchange programs, all that sort of thing. A letter of reference where I would give you my recommendation. So that happens a lot. So all those things need to be fairly formal, and they're normal reasons we might write a formal letter. Letters written in response to a request for information, for example, a letter sent to accept or decline an invitation. Obviously, if you were invited to a formal business meeting, declining it might be quite difficult. You'd have to say, I'm sorry, I've got a previous engagement which is more important, but you can't say more important than your meeting. You have to say has precedence because to accept it is much more easy. Yes, I'll be there. A job offer, that has to be handled very carefully. You can easily lose a job offer by accepting it in a bad way. I know someone that happened to. A reply to a request for information. And letters written to influence the recipient to take action willingly. For example, a sales letter. A salesman is basically somebody who argues for a living, who's trying to argue you into buying or accepting this product. A letter requesting for donations, that's going to be much more sympathetic. I would say less formal, more emotion driven. Or a covering letter for a job application. There's a very strict format for cover letters. The good news is, because of the internet, they're very easy to find good cover letters online that you can just change and put your details into. So, unfortunately, that's a double-edged sword. It's very easy to find good cover letter templates so that you can just put your own information in it. The other side of that is, because it's so easy, you've got to work twice as hard to make a good job of it, and people judge you more harshly. Because it's so easy. It's so easy to just get somebody else's work and modify it and send it in and make it look great, that we are now very, very critical of things like CVs. Okay, now we've got an example of a letter. I'm not going to bother with this structure, because it changes country to country. This is Singaporean. We have sender's address, date, recipient's name. That isn't always true. We're going to focus more on getting the letter worded correctly. I think that's where we need to focus. I don't think we need to bother about the structure of it. The structure of it is probably different in Cambodia. Even if you're writing in English, there's probably a different format here. Your job these days is to go online and find out what the formal structure is before you send the letter. If you're sending a letter to an American, they have a system. If you're sending it to London, we have a system. If they're sending it to Singapore, they have a different system. So find out what the system is where you're sending it to. We'll work on getting the formal language structured out properly in this class, because that's going to be relevant to everybody forever. So the language used in formal letters usually feature the use of the following. Active voice in most sentences. I used to think active and passive voice was pretty much unimportant until I did web design. There's SEO, search engine optimization, which makes your website more easily found by Google. And active voice, you start to realize just how important it is. Passive voice, I think it's correctly named. It makes you sound like you're passive, uninterested, and less involved. You have to be in active voice, especially to sell something, to drive your message home. And when we talk about selling something, we're also talking about selling the idea of you as a good candidate for a job. These things are very important. Action verbs, of course. Adverbs, yes. Modal auxiliaries like would, should, could, and must, yeah. They're actually quite important. Modal auxiliaries should have covered last year. We will go over them quite a bit this year again, I think. I've spent so many years teaching grade 10, 11, I can't remember which is which all the time. I think we do cover modal auxiliaries quite a bit. Would, should, could, and must. We'll go over how to use them properly. Prepositions and prepositional phrases, where things are in space and time and their relation to each other. Pronouns. Oh, let's not play the pronoun game. The thing is about the modern idea of pronouns, it's pretty irrelevant. We've always used pronouns politely. We've never said, dear sir. It's always dear sir or madam, or to whom it may concern. It's always been open. We've always been polite, and we've always politely considered that somebody might be a male or female, and we've never really been bigoted about it. I don't really, in England anyway, we've never been a particularly sexist country. It's like slavery. In America, they talk about Black Lives Matter, or slavery was a terrible thing, and it's blown out of all proportion. Yeah, we've never been particularly bigoted in most countries, England especially. Black Lives Matter actually did go to London, and they started making protests. But in England, we didn't just ban slavery early on. We actually made it illegal and then sent out naval blockades to stop black slaves being taken from African countries and sold. So England actually did most of the work in actually banning slavery around the world. But still, you know, people these days don't learn history, and that's the danger. So yeah, get the pronouns right, obviously, but try and just be open to different perspectives. We don't need to pander to people who think they're an Apache attack helicopter. We need to be polite and open to the fact that you're going to be writing to either a male or a female, and that's pretty much all you need to do. You don't need to worry about idiots who demand attention by trying to change their pronouns. Anyone like that, then you're not going to find them in a professional setting. Those kind of people who try to identify by weird pronouns, they're going to be making your coffee for you or filling your bag at a supermarket. They are not going to be running a business. So we don't need to worry about those. But get the pronouns right in as much as don't just say dear sir, because it's not offensive. I mean, anyone offended by that deserves to be offended, but it's a little bit narrow-minded of you. So make sure that you're open to either gender and any kind of person. Treat everybody as an individual. I don't consider myself a white and bald man. I'm just Jack. Anybody has a problem with that, then it's me. It's a personal problem for me. I don't identify as any one particular thing. I'm not proud of being any one particular thing. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to be born in London. I didn't ask to be. I don't see how people can be proud of the situation of their birth. It was an accident. And you tend to find that the people who are proud of it, they're proud of being black or they're proud of being white. They tend to have nothing else to talk about. Those kind of people are the people who should be the least proud of anything. Because if you're only proud of the color of your skin, you haven't got anything else to be proud of. Be proud of the things that you did or you can do. Those are the people I respect. The present tense to describe actions that is taking place currently. Obviously, you're going to see that. The past tense. When we can, we will slow down and have a look at past, present, and future tenses, because in my experience, and you guys might be different, but in my experience, that's where most of you have problems. One of my students from the last 2 years emailed me a short story she'd written, and the tenses were bad. So she's someone that wants to be a writer, but she couldn't stick in one particular tense in her writing. Because I know you don't have past, present, and future tense in Khmer, so a lot of you have trouble adapting to English, where we do have lots of very strict tenses. So we will look at that anytime we get a chance to, and just remind you that English has tenses that need to be stuck to and used correctly. The future tense here. Formal style, obviously we're looking at mostly formal. Positive language and persuasive language. Positive language, positive as opposed to negative, is talking about the way things are or should be, never about things that shouldn't be. It's the same as, what is it? I've lost it. Passive and active language. Always try and stay positive. We will do this rather than we can't do that. We don't want to say, I can't fly. We want to say, I can walk. Okay, keep things positive makes you sound like a better person. Nobody wants to talk to that person who's always saying, well, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do that. They get old fast. Okay, we don't want to be around those people. if I give you an impossible task and you say, well, okay, let me try and do as much of this as I can. I think I could do this. Now that person, I'll be interested in. The person who just says, oh, I can't do that, it's too hard. We don't want to load those people, okay? So try and stay positive. Persuasive language, there is actually a section on that at the back of the book. We'll get to that. But we're talking about debating, we're talking about selling, we're talking about how to get someone to agree with your opinion. Those kind of language techniques are usually exactly the opposite of what I have been trying to preach so far. They're usually using emotive language to try and convince you that you should feel the way I feel, which is a trick, it's a trap. I'll show you how those tricks all work later. So okay, so that's an introduction briefly to what we're going to be looking at in this chapter. So we're going to have a look at letters, formal and informal. So I'm going to give you an example, and we can work through it, and you can identify the stuff in it. We're probably not going to use too many of the examples in the book. Looking forward, some of them are pretty bad, and just generally horrendously out of date. So let me give you an example, and back to real Jack.